That's good. If a Gentile lit the lamp, a Jew may use its light, but if it did so for a Jew, he may not use it. If a Gentile drew water to water his own animal, a Jew may water his animal after him. But if he did so for a Jew, he may not use it. If a Gentile made a gangway upon which to disembark, a Jew may disembark after him, but if he did so for a Jew, he may not use it. It once happened that Rabbi Gamliel and the elders were arriving on a ship, and a Gentile made a gangway by which to disembark, and Rabbi Gamliel and the elders disembarked by it.
Okay. Yud Zayin Aleph. All vessels may be moved on Shabbat and their doors along with them, even if they were dismantled on Shabbat, as the doors of the vessels are unlike the doors of the house. It is prohibited, because they're not prepared. The doors of the house are prohibited because they're not prepared from before Shabbat.
A person may take a hammer with which to crack nuts, or a hatchet with which to cut a cake or press figs, a saw with which to slice cheese, a shovel with which to scoop up dried figs, a winnowing shovel or a pitchfork on which to put something for a child, a spindle or a weaver's reed with which to open spear fruit, a hand needle with which to take out a thorn, or a sack maker's needle with which to open a door.
Okay, continuing the Muktzah discussion, Kane Shel Zaysim, a reed that you check olives. Now, just a bit of background information. When they would preserve olives, they would stick them in a barrel and leave them to soften, because you know what olives are like when they're on the tree; they're hard. And I often wonder, like, really, these things become edible at some point. But they eventually soften. And the way you check is by sticking a reed in. Now, normally, a reed is just another word for a stick, and sticks are muktzah. Okay, but this is something that has been specially designated as something to check olives, so that immediately gives it a chashivas, and it's not muktzah anymore. Furthermore, if there's a knot on the end, now what do? They put some sort of knot on the end of the stick to act as a receptacle, perhaps to pick to see if to pick up the liquid or something like that. But whatever the case, that kesher creates a kind of a base kibble in the end, and therefore it's makabel tumah. So that's kind of an incidental thing on that the Mishnah points out, is that if it does have this knot at the end, I'm not sure if this Mishnah actually also appears in Kalim. But anyway, if it's got the knot at the end, it's makabel tumah, because now it's got a base kibble, and we know that the clay eighth need a base kibble to be tameh. Being love, but if it doesn't have such a thing, then it's not makabel tumah, because it's a pshutei clay eights.
It says that if the hollow cane, if there's a knot at the end, if the hollow cane is closed by a tip, by a natural knot, or by a specially constructed bowl.
Right. Whatever it is that creates a receptacle.
Right.
However, it doesn't matter whether it does or doesn't. It's still mutter to use this, and you can pick it up on Shabbos. Okay. Mishna Daled, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol HaKelim Nitalin. All kelim may be picked up. Chutz min hamasar hagadol v'yased shel machresha. Says anything can be picked up except for this large saw or the peg of the plow. Why is that? Because these are particularly valuable items. Okay, and we're now introducing a concept here called muktzah machmas chesron kis. That something is muktzah because it is so expensive. So normally we said, if you've got a hammer and you want to crack nuts, you take the hammer and you crack the nuts. But if you have a kli that's like so important, that's so expensive that a person would never ever use that for anything other than its intended purpose, then it reverts back into the status of muktzah, because it's now something that people take care of. So another typical case would be of a shochet's knife. He's not going to use that knife to cut his steak, because that's, those are professional implements, and he doesn't want to mess with that. So therefore, the shochet's knife remains muktzah on Shabbos, even if you think of a mutar purpose for it.
But many of the things we learned about muktzah was that You can't use a utensil that is a professional utensil.
Yeah,
It's more of a householder utensil.
correct. Right. So the hammer we don't really care about a general, but these things we do.
Right.
Okay. כל הכלים ניטלים לצורך ושלא לצורך, and all kalim may be picked up whether it's for personal need or not for any need at all. Now, we understand this to mean that these are kalim that are not even muktzah. So, for example, plates. If you want to pick up a plate, obviously you can pick it up to use it because there's never any shayla of muktzah. But you can even pick it up just because you feel like fiddling with something. And it's not for any particular, even if it's not for the need of itself or for the need of its place. But for example, he just wants to say, oh, I'm going to move it from the sun into the shade. Okay. Rabbi Nehemiah, why do we say this? Because Rabbi Nehemiah dissents and says, Ein nitalin ela latzorech. Even kalim that aren't muktzah, says Rabbi Nehemiah, you can only pick them up if you want to use them. But otherwise, keep your hands off. Don't carry stuff just for stam. Okay, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Nehemiah, but it's important to note that there is a Tana out there who says that Shabbos is so kadosh that you shouldn't even pick anything up unless you're using it. Mishna hey kol hakelim hanitalin b'Shabbos shivreim nitalin imahem. So let's say you have a kli that was mutter to use on Shabbos and then it got broken. Okay, so now the shards of this thing may still be handled. But they still have to be able to perform some kind of malacha. So, well, not malacha as in malacha on Shabbos, but some sort of useful function. Okay, shivrei areva. So let's say you've got a big kneading bowl, and it got smashed. So you can take a piece of that and put it over the opening of a barrel. Okay, and it's still serving a function. So that broken piece is not necessarily muktzah. Okay, shivrei zechuchis lechasos be'enis piapach. And similarly, if a glass kli broke, you could use one of the shards to cover a little jug of oil. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Says you can't use them for a completely different usage. They still have to be fit for usage of their original purpose. For example, he says shivrei areva latzuk lesochan mikpah. So this kneading bowl the pieces have to be big enough that you could put some sort of thick porridge into them. Okay, so you could still use that. And again, the glass is to contain a little bit of oil in it. So again, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. Any kind of usage of these broken things is acceptable. But even Rabbi Yehuda only argues on the case where it broke on Shabbos. But if it broke before Shabbos, he says then that's fine because what's his issue is that he says it's muktzah machmas nolad. Right now, because it's a new entity that's coming to being. It used to be a kneading bowl. It's now a bunch of shards, and once it's a bunch of shards, you can only use it if you're still using it as kneading bowl or something that's similar to a kneading bowl. But if you're now using it as the cover of a barrel, this is now considered a nolad, and therefore he prohibits it.
We had something with shards something was broken, and you use the shard to pick up other items, which is, I guess, similar to this.
We had a lot of this in Maseches Kalim, when we were determining when a kli broke, how much could it be broken until it lost its how much did it have to be broken until it lost its truma.
Right.
Right, and it depend. There was a lot of it depends inside there, which we'll be happy to revise when we go back into Maseches Kalim. Okay. Okay. Perek Yud Gimel.
Yud Gimel Aleph. Reb Eliezer says one who weaves 3 threads at the beginning or adds 1 thread to woven fabric is liable, but the comments say whether at the beginning or at the end its amount is 2 threads.
One who makes 2 meshes That is, ties the threads of the warp, attaching them to either the nearing or the kairos, which if I remember correctly, that's like one is a industrial loom and the other one is a home loom. In a winnow, sieve, or basket is liable. One who sews is liable if he sews 2 stitches, and one who tears is liable if he tears enough fabric in order to sew 2 stitches to repair it.
And one who tears in his anger or for his dead, and all who act destructively are exempt. But one who destroys in order to repair, his minimum measure for liability is the same as for repairs. Okay.
Ikorim Imodalad.
Okay. The flute played before them until they reached the Temple Mount. When they reached the Temple Mount, even King Agrippa would take the basket on his shoulder and enter until he reached the Temple Court. When he reached the Temple Court, the Levites intoned the song, "I will extol you, O Lord, for you have raised me up and have not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me."
The birds tied to the basket were offered as whole burnt offerings, and those which they held in their hands they gave to the priests.
While the basket was still on his shoulder, he read from "I profess this day to the Lord your God," until the end of the passage. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Until a wandering Aramean was my father. When he reached the wandering Aramean was my father, he took down the basket from his shoulder and held it by its rim. And the priest placed his hand underneath it and waved it, and read from "A wandering Aramean was my father," until the end of the passage, and placed it by the side of the altar, and he prostrated himself and went out.
Chumas Dalad base.
If an Am Haaretz had produced in the storehouse and gave 1 sa'ah to a Levite and 1 sa'ah to a poor man, he may separate another 8 sa'ahs and eat them. This says Reb Meir. But the Chachamim say he may only separate in accordance with the exact quantity.
The amount of truma, a generous amount, 1/40th. Beis Shammai says 1/30th. The average amount is 1/50th. A stingy amount is 1/60th. If he gave truma and discovered that it was only 1/60th, his truma is valid and he need not give again. If he does go back and add to it, the extra amount is liable to tithes. If he found that it was only 1/61st, it is valid, but he must give truma again according to his established practice and measure weight or number. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if it be not from produce close by.
Just to make another point over here, that we only quoted Beis Shammai's opinion on the Ayin Yafa, but Beis Shammai also disagree on the other points. They also go up in tens. So according to Beis Shammai, the Ayin Yafa is Echad Me Shloshim, and the Beinonis is Me Arbaim, and the Ra is Me Chamishim. Okay, so they're just 10 ahead of Beis Hillel.
If one says to his agent, "Go and set aside truma," he must separate according to the owner's mind. If he does not know the owner's mind, he separates according to the average person, 1/50th. If he gave 10 less or 10 more, his truma is truma. If he intentionally added even only 1, his truma is not truma.
In other words, if he violates his shlichus, as soon as he takes truma, either more or less than what the Baal Habayis told him to do, then having violated his shlichus, he's no longer shaliach, and he falls back into the category of a torem shelo midas, that he's taking truma of somebody else's produce without permission, in which case it's completely ineffective. Okay. Taurus Zayin Ches.
If someone was tahor and diverted his attention from eating, Rabbi Yehuda rules him tahor, since it is the way of tamei people to separate from him. But the Chachamim rule him tamei. If his hands were tahor and he diverted his attention from eating, even though he said, "I know that my hands have not become contaminated," his hands are tamei, because a person's hands are active.
A woman entered her house to bring out some bread for a poor man. And when she came out, she found him standing at the side of the loaves of truma. Similarly, a woman who went out and found her friend raking out coals under a cooking pot of truma. Rabbi Akiva says that they are unclean, but the Chachamim say that they are clean. Rabbi Eliezer ben Pila says, but who does Rabbi Akiva rule? But why does Rabbi Akiva rule that they are unclean and the sages rule that they're clean? Because women are gluttonous, and each may be suspected of uncovering her neighbor's cooking pot to get to know what she's cooking.
If one lives together with an Amma Aretz in a courtyard, and he forgot utensils in the courtyard, even sealed earthenware barrels or a sealed earthenware oven, these are tameh. Rabbi Yehuda rules the oven tahor when it is sealed, and Rabbi Yossi says even if the oven is tameh until it makes a partition for it that is 10 tefachim high.
Okay.
All right. Menachos. Eschet. Right?
Yeah.
All must perform leaning, except for a deaf, mute, an imbecile, a minor, a blind man, a non-Jew, a slave, an agent, and a woman. Leaning is considered the remainder of the precept. It is done on the head with 2 hands. In the place where the leaning is performed, the animal is slaughtered, and the leaning immediately precedes the slaughtering. Just a question on this. It's done with the 2 hands that are placed on top of the head, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
But the shkita is not performed on the top of the head.
No? So?
But it says here that it says in the place where the leaning is performed, the animal is
No,
slaughtered.
no, not the place on the animal, the place in the base of Mikdash.
In the place where the leaning is performed, the animal is slaughtered. Okay, all right. I was reading it in a different way. Okay.
Yes, and it's not the location on the animal's body, it's the location in the Azara.
Yeah, all right. Okay, sorry.
Sure.
There is an aspect of greater stringency with regard to placing hands than with regard to waving. And there is an aspect of stringency with regard to waving than with regard to placing hands. The stringency for placing hands is that if several people are partners in bringing an offering, one of them waves the offering on behalf of all the others, but one cannot fulfill the requirement of placing hands on behalf of all the partners. Rather, each one has to put their hands. The stringency for waving is that waving is practiced in the case of both offerings of an individual and communal. Okay. And in the case of both when the offerings are alive and when they are slaughtered. By contrast, placing hands is practiced only with a live animal. A further stringency is that waving is practiced in both in the case of an item in which there is a living spirit and in the case of an item in which there is no living spirit. So like with an animal and also the meal offerings. And that's it.
Rabbi Yishmael says the Omer was brought on the Sabbath from 3 saw and on a weekday from 5. But the comments say whether on the Sabbath or a weekday it came from 3. Reb Chanina, the administrator of the Kohanim, says on the Sabbath it was reaped by an individual with 1 sickle and in 1 basket on a weekday by 3. In 3 baskets with 3 sickles. But the Chachamim say whether on the Sabbath or on weekdays it was done by 3 people with 3 baskets and 3 sickles.
Okay.
Udarim.
Okay, Udarim.
Good. There are 3 Na'aros whose Nidorim stand. A Bogeris, who is an orphan, a Nara who became a Bogeris and is an orphan, a Nara who has not become a Bogeris and is an orphan, a Bogeris whose father died, a Nara who became a Bogeris and her father died, a Nara who has not yet become a Bogeris and her father died, a Nara whose father died and after her father died she became a Bogeris, a Bogeris whose father is living, a Nara who became a Bogeris and whose father is living. Rabbi Yehuda says also, if one married off his minor daughter and she became widowed or divorced and returned to him, she is still a Nara.
This Mishnah actually didn't teach any new halachas. It was actually just taught as a summary of different cases that can happen with a girl changing domain from her father to her husband, etc.
Yeah.
If a woman says to her husband, deriving benefit from my father or from your father is konan for me, if I will prepare anything for you. Or if she said, deriving benefit from you is konan for me, if I will prepare anything for my father or for your father, the husband can nullify.
At first, they used to say there are three women who must be divorced. Yet they take their ketubah. One who says, "I am unclean to you," or "Heaven is between me and you," or "I have removed from all Jews." They later retracted this so that a wife should not be set her eyes upon another man and behave immorally toward her husband. Rather, one who says, "I am unclean to you," must prove it. "Heaven is between me and you." They should plead with her. "I am removed from all Jews." He should revoke his share so that she continue in marital relations with him, but she is removed from other Jews.
That if she took a neder from all Jews, then the husband can revoke the aspect that pertains to him. Now, interesting. We said that Rabbi Akiva taught us that if a neder is partially revoked, then it's completely revoked. So why, if he can do חלק זה של הנדר הנוגע לבעל, יכול הוא להפר שהרי כאן דברים שבין לבינה. Interesting. That seems like a pretty strong kasha, that once he's annulled the vow against himself in the klal of all Jews, why hasn't it also annulled against all Jews? Does Ostrel say anything about that?
No, I didn't. Let me see. Ostrel says about.
It'll be in the last section of the Mishna.
Like, removed from all Jews.
Yeah.
Okay, it says this is a neder which forbids her to have relations with any Jew. A woman who makes such a declaration must surely experience pain during intimacy, and thus she is considered to have been driven by this to declare such a prohibition. The rabbis necessitated divorce in this case because the marriage could not be allowed to continue without relations.
Right.
However, they allowed it to receive a ketubah because they took into consideration the extenuating circumstances following this.
Now take that right at the end of the Mishnah. It says that the husband can nullify his part.
I don't see anything about that. I don't see. No, remove from all Jews and no, I don't see. I'm sorry, I don't see anything.
Does Sefaria say anything interesting?
Nope. I see the question though, because we said earlier that if you nullify part of a neder, you get rid of the whole thing.
Yeah. So if he's nullified, so I mean, the one thing that's different over here is that it's hafara and not hatara. Hatara is what a chacham can do, and we said this thing in the context of hatara, not hafara, and perhaps that is the difference. But I'd like to see that explicitly, if that is the case. I'll have to do a bit of research.
It says here, although a neder such as this ought to be one that affects their mutual relationship, the rabbis initially maintained that since the husband could divorce her without revoking the neder, he could not revoke it. And the Miri explains that although he could not revoke the prohibition as applied to him, he had no power to revoke the interdiction directed at the rest of the Jews, since being prohibited from relations with other Jews while married to him is neither self-denying nor something that affects their relationship. So initially the rabbis maintained that if he could not revoke some part of the neder, what related to others, he could not revoke at all. If that helps, I don't know. They later retract.
I mean, I'm interested that now that they said that he can revoke his part, why does that not revoke the rest? But it might be that it sounds to me, just based on the wording that they're using over there, is that he can only revoke his aspect, his part of it, but he can't revoke it as regards to the rest of the world.
They later retracted this, so their wife should not set her eyes upon another man. And it says, in all the above cases, the rabbis originally established the law on the assumption that she was telling the truth. Later on, as the level of morality deteriorated, there was a strong suspicion that a woman who made such claims may have done so in order to be free to marry some other man and was not being truthful. Therefore, they amended their ruling as follows. In the absence of proof, she would not be believed, and her husband would not have to divorce her. Initially, she had been believed because the rabbis could find no motive for her to make such a self-humiliating claim, but when they saw that the woman would do so in order to gain a divorce, they insisted on more substantial evidence before obligating her husband to divorce her.
Yeah. Okay.
All
All right.
right.
If I find anything else interesting, I will let you all know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
We're
great.
moving on now from for Nadarim.
Yeah. So tomorrow's Nazir.
Right. Okay. Have a
Okay.
great day, everybody. Enjoy.
Day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.